Hi, fight fans. Welcome back to episode 8 of Puncher's Chance. I'm Anthony Balester, always joined by Brett Cagle. We got a lot to talk about, Brett. Maybe not so much of a great weekend last weekend. We did have a good heavyweight fight with Spivak getting the win over Tibera. We got a lot to break down, upcoming this week. We got PFL. We also got UFC 305, so we have a lot to break down. Also got our rumors to get to as well, Brett. First, though, make sure that you are following Puncher's Chance podcast on all social medias at PunchETB. Also, make sure to follow the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to also be following our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for our show and all of our other shows and ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to our podcast wherever you can.
Puncher's Chance is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
So, Brett, we got to start with what's going to be the biggest thing of this week. I think could be probably one of the biggest fights of the year. We finally get to see Dricus du Plessis defending the middleweight championship of the world against one of the all-time greatest of all time, Israel Adesanya. Now, this was a fight that, us fight fans thought we would have got last September. Unfortunately, things happen. Dricus had injury, insert Sean Strickland, and the rest is history. But, Dricus came back and was able to get the belt either way. And now since he won the belt over Sean Strickland, we finally get to see Dricus du Plessis fight Israel Adesanya like we wanted all along. This is going to be a very interesting fight. I think this fight could go either way. I do think Israel Adesanya may be out of his prime, Brett. I think in his last few fights, he hasn't looked the same. He did get that knockout win over Alex Pereira, but honestly, he was losing that whole fight. He kind of set Pereira up and, got hurt and then was able to get lucky with that shot. And that's all he needed to win. But pretty much, Brett, in that fight, the last fight before that with Pereira, and then the fight with Strickland, he really didn't look that good. I'm not sure if all the fights has really added up to him. He's been in a lot of battles and a lot of championship round fights. But I don't think Israel Adesanya is the same Adesanya as before. And I think Dricus is, just a machine. I think he could do it all. He's super, super strong. He's got to be one of the biggest, middleweights on the planet. He's got to be walking around in the 250s, 225s. And because of that strength, he is a good grappler. Because of that strength, he's got a good takedown defense, and he is maybe unorthodox. But because of that, he's able to land strikes and powerful strikes at that. So, Brett, I'm going to go with Dricus du Plessis to get the, the win. I think right now Adesanya is the very, very slight favorite. So I'm going to go Dricus to defend the belt in kind of an upset right here. I think he's going to smother him. He's going to, use that grappling and strength and get some takedowns. Izzy will probably land some strikes on the feet, but I think Dricus will land some powerful shots. I think he's going to get the win by decision, Brett. But before I ask you about this, Brett, I looked at this and I thought about it. When was the last time the middleweight belt was successfully defended? The last few times, the guy who won the belt lost it immediately after. We've seen Izzy lose to Alex. Then we've seen Alex lose it back to Izzy. Izzy lost to Strickland. And now Strickland, lost to Dricus. So is Dricus going to break that curse and finally defend the belt successfully? What are your thoughts about that, Brett?
I believe the belt's going back to Israel Adesanya. We're going to differ here. But I liked what you said about Dricus du Plessis. I think he's the most well-rounded guy right now in the division at 185 pounds. He's got multiple submissions on his record. He's taken out, former world champions in Robert Whittaker. He just beat Sean Strickland. Everybody's talking about the strength of competition that Izzy's fought, but Dricus du Plessis' strength of competition is incredible as well. So, I think that he's a legitimate champion. If he gets a victory over a guy in Israel Adesanya, he's a future Hall of Famer. I think that he really cements himself as the face of this division moving forward. But I don't know if he's going to be able to get it done. I think that Israel Adesanya is a guy who rises to the occasion. I think in some of those fights where you see Alex Pereira, after he beat Alex Pereira, he gets to the mountaintop, the highest of highs in his career. And now he's facing a guy in Sean Strickland, who's ranked number 8, coming into that matchup on short notice. I don't think that Izzy necessarily got up emotionally for that matchup, or that he was on his, A game. Now we've seen him come, posting photographs on Instagram. He looks to be in tremendous shape coming into this fight. We'll see on, the weigh-in how he looks, officially, but he looks to be in tremendous shape, looks to be taking this seriously and reinvigorated, revitalizing his career to try and make another run. He would be the only man to capture the middleweight championship on 3 separate occasions. And honestly, I think he's the second best middleweight of all time right now. And if he can keep this fight standing, I think that he could just really pick apart Dricus du Plessis, who, honestly took a lot of damage against Sean Strickland, who is not a power puncher and is a volume guy as well. Some people thought that Strickland won that fight. I certainly thought that he got the best of du Plessis on the feet. Du Plessis had 5 well-timed takedowns throughout that fight that I think edged him on the judges' scorecards. But he's going to have to use that grappling for 5 rounds again against Israel Adesanya. I could see this one being a very close decision, maybe 3-2. Some rounds Dricus grinds it out with his boxing and then gets it to the ground. Some rounds Izzy, picks him apart from the outside. I think that this is going to be a very good fight, a very competitive fight. And I think it's a legacy-defining fight, which favors Israel Adesanya with his ability to rise to the occasion.
So it seems like we both got this fight going decision, but we just got to go in opposite ways. Now, you do make a good point, Brett. A motivated, determined Israel Adesanya is the most scariest Israel Adesanya. Like you said, when he, was super, super determined to, kill his demons with Alex Pereira, that was a different Adesanya. You've seen it all in fight camp. You see it in the press conferences. It was a very, very determined man. It almost seemed like it was a life or death situation. And it seems like we're getting a similar Israel Adesanya here. There's a lot to play at here. There's a lot of talk about the true African champion. Now, Dricus is from South Africa. And as he stated, he's the first African champion in the UFC to where he literally resides in Africa, spends his whole life in Africa, was raised in Africa, and still lives there to this day.
Yeah.
But he wasn't trying to say that to, diminish the other African champions like we've seen with Kamaru, Usman, and others. But Israel Adesanya really took that to heart and took it personally. So I think he's got something personal in this. I think he's fighting for his own country. To put his, his name on the map and show, and fight for maybe Kamaru Usman and all those other African champs that maybe feel disrespected over this. So there's that added motivation, and it definitely makes this fight, super, super, super exciting. You did mention about Israel Adesanya, becoming a potential 3-time, champion. The only thing is, Brett, I feel like, because this isn't football or NBA, I feel like becoming a 2 or 3-time, champion really isn't that impressive, because for you to become a multiple champion, you have to lose the belt in the first place. It's not like in the NBA or the NFL where you start over each year and you got guys like Tom Brady who are 7 times champions. Israel Adesanya had to have that bad fight for Strickland to become a 3-time champion. So if people out there are saying, him being a 3-time middleweight champion is more impressive than being a 2-time champion, then basically what you're saying was it was better for him to lose to Strickland and lose the belt and then come back and win the belt. Yeah. But, either way, a win's a win, and it would be impressive. And if he gets a win over Dricus, being the younger man and being in the prime of his career, I think Dricus may be one of the toughest matchups of Adesanya's career. And if he gets a win on that, I don't care, 2, 3, 4-time champion, I'm going to be very impressed. And you got to give him as one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you're saying. You never want to lose the title, but the ability to win it back shows a certain level of resiliency over time that I believe really propels someone's career when you're talking about Hall of Fames and rankings of greatest of all times in weight classes. But let's talk a little bit about what everybody's interested in this weekend, and that's the betting line. This one was very interesting to me. They've got the former champion Israel Adesanya right now as a slight betting favorite, -125. Were you surprised that Dricus du Plessis is the betting underdog, considering he's the champion and considering he may have some stylistic advantages being the better grappler?
100%, bro. That's why when I was explaining about me picking Dricus, I was surprised. I thought when, I sat there and thought about it in my head and tried to break down the fight, when I decided to go with Dricus, I'm like, okay, I'm going with the favorite. Sometimes, like when we had the Leon Edwards and Bilal, I knew Bilal was going to be the underdog. But in this one, I'm like, I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with the favorite. I guess I was gladly mistaken. It is pretty close, though. It's almost as close to a pick'em as you could get. But it does look like Izzy's going to be the slight favorite. I guess maybe that has a lot to do with his history and what he's done, and the fact that maybe Dricus hasn't had that long reign. He only has beaten two great fighters in Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland. So maybe because of what Izzy has done in the history, maybe that's why, and because he has that added motivation. But honestly, Brett, I was really shocked. I thought Dricus would definitely at least be the favorite, as he is coming in as the champion.
Yeah, and to that point, Dricus du Plessis has been a huge betting underdog in the last three on all three of his fights. I mean, he's not a huge betting underdog this weekend, but against Robert Whittaker in that fight, he was a 3-1 dog. If people go back and remember, they thought that Whittaker was going to get rid of him like he did with Alexandre here recently and turn back another contender. Well, Dricus du Plessis was actually the one who was able to get rid of Robert Whittaker. He goes and fights Sean Strickland again as a slight betting underdog, and then this weekend is a betting underdog. If he beats Israel Adesanya, I think I can confidently say he will not be an underdog again for the rest of his UFC championship tenure until he loses the belt, more than likely.
Yeah, and you know what, Brett? I guess the bettors don't like him, and
yeah.
Maybe rightfully so, because he is so unorthodox, Brett. It's so hard to kind of explain what he does in the octagon. And, stylistically, it's hard to say, because it looks like in each fight, he fights a little differently. And he seems to just be, everybody's kryptonite. He seems to know exactly what to do against each and every fighter, Brett. And, what also made me, the last thing I want to say about Dricus, what made me so confident in picking Dricus was he stated that, for a long time, he's been studying Israel Adesanya. Izzy Adesanya has been the champion for, quite some time now. And, Dricus, knew that Adesanya was the champion when he entered the UFC. So he always game planned for him, knowing that, sometime down the line, he was going to have to fight this guy for the belt. The only difference is he ended up getting the belt before he got to fight him, so he will have to defend it. But he said he's been game planning for this for quite some time, and he honestly thinks out of all the fighters that he's fought, he thinks Adesanya might be the one that he might be the most, planned for, and might be the one that he might be able to have the best performance against. What do you think about that statement he made, Brett?
I think that if he can get this fight to the ground, Dricus du Plessis has some of the best ground and pound in the division. I think that he's got submissions. He can be a legitimate threat to finishing this fight if he gets Izzy on his back. But the thing is, if he stands and trades with Izzy, he's playing a dangerous game as well. We've seen him, we're talking about how great Alex Pereira is. We want to see Alex Pereira fight John Jones. 2 fights ago, Israel Adesanya knocked that man out. And, he's still very dangerous. I know that Sean Strickland went in there and, kind of humbled him and made him look bad. There were excuses coming out of that fight about, potentially partying leading up to in the month leading up to the fight and things like that. But we're going to see this weekend. And this is, it's put up or shut up time for Israel Adesanya. This is maybe his last chance at UFC Gold. If he loses this one, there's no chance at him fighting Alex Pereira, more than likely. He's not going to get his middleweight title back. This is it. This is the career-defining performance for him. One last chance to capture UFC Gold. So I can't wait for this weekend. We've got a former champion and a current champion who's a betting underdog. So a lot of interest from a lot of angles going into this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. Israel Adesanya seems like the one that probably has more to lose in this matchup.
Yeah.
This brings us to our next fight. We got a great matchup in the flyweight division. We got Steve Ursag, who I'm a huge fan of, going up against Kai Kara-France. A guy who, both guys actually are coming off losses. Kai Kara-France didn't look too good in that split decision loss to, Abazi. Steve Ursay nearly, almost won against his matchup against Alex Pantoja for the flyweight championship belt. He was one round away from, being the champion as we speak. But I think out of all the guys who has fought Pantoja up to this point, he was the one who gave him the toughest matchup. I think both guys can strike. I think both guys are fast strikers. Both guys got power. Urseg's definitely going to be the much taller fighter. He's going to be the bigger fighter, which is surprising that they both do have the same reach. But Urseg will be the taller fighter. I do think Urseg is probably the better all-around fighter. I think he's probably the better grappler over Kara France. I think his striking is equally as good. His boxing is equally as good. I'm going to go Steve Urseg here by decision. He gets back on track, and we're going to be talking about him in the title contention. But how do you see this fight going, Brett?
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't give my official prediction for the main event either. I had Israel Adesanya by decision. You had Dricus, correct, by decision?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and I like what you said here about Steve Urseg. I'm going to go one step further. I've got him by submission in this one. 6-0 on the career of Urseg when it comes to submissions. Never been submitted, 6 submission victories. Kara France has already been submitted 3 times. So I think that's going to be a glaring weakness. Now, on the feet, Steve Urseg is 4 inches taller than Kara France. He has great power. We saw him knock out Matt Schnell and turn his lights out with 1 punch. He was able to damage a guy in Pantoja repeatedly with his jab. And Pantoja is a very tough customer, one of the toughest fighters in the entire UFC. So, Urseg really impressed me more than anything in that fight with Pantoja. And I think he's going to be making a push back towards the title sooner rather than later. I like Urseg to get this one done by submission. And I think he could get it done in the first or second round.
Yeah, it seems like we both pretty agree here. I just think, Kara France is pretty tough. We've seen him tough it out and, make, the Abazi fight at least a split decision. I think he'll do the same and be able to tough it out and make, Steve Urseg work for everything. But I do think, I agree, Brett. I do think Steve Urseg will win this fight, get back on track. And I'm going to go by decision.
Yeah, I think we're both leaning towards Urseg in this one. I respect Kara France, and this is a New Zealand versus Australia matchup, so I'm sure the fans will be really interested in that in attendance. But I just don't think – I think there's too much to overcome with the height. If he's going to win this one, I feel like he's going to have to outbox him and out-kickbox him on the feet. And I just don't know how he's going to get past the length of Steve Urseg and then also have a disadvantage in the grappling as well.
Yeah, Brett, and honestly, I know a lot of people probably didn't know who Steve Urseg was, 9 months ago. But honestly, Brett, I feel like after his last couple performances, I feel like he's starting to become a household name. And I think he's starting to become maybe one of the few flyweights that could really sell tickets. I think the UFC matchmakers really, really love Steve Urseg. He's got a really exciting style. And if he goes out there and has a real exciting fight, and like you said, Brett, if he does get a finish, wow. With that flyweight division, I know there's deserving contenders, but we've seen the UFC decide, with exciting over, most deserving.
Yeah, and he has the potential to end fights violently. We saw that with Schnell. And he's a good technical competitor. He's got a good jab. He's very smart. I talk about his intelligence. He made a mistake in that Pantoja fight that lost him the title in that 5th round, going for a takedown and then getting reversed. But leading up to that, Steve Urseg really did show his intelligence in a lot of his fights versus Dave Dvorak, versus Matt Schnell, setting up that left hook. He's a very technical fighter, and I think he'll get back in track. And I think he's kind of beating himself up for the mistake that he made in that title matchup as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to, light a fire under him. And I think he's going to come back, and we may see his best performance to date this weekend. Yeah. We got a good fight, in the lightweight division. We got Matthias Gamrot going up against one of the fan favorites in Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker, always has exciting fights. Both guys, Brett, can wrestle and box. I do think Gamrot is the superior grappler. I also think Gamrot is also just as probably good of a striker, or almost as good of a striker as Dan Hooker. Gamrot can KO people, and he can strike fighters and really hurt them. And he can grapple at an elite level. I know Gamrot, is not known for finishes, but I really think, Brett, he's got a high potential, and he may be fighting for a title shot at some point soon. So I'm going to go Gamrot in this one. I think he's going to maul Dan Hooker. I think he's going to do really well, on the feet as well, and, outstrike him as well, and also, have more takedowns. So I'm going to go Matthias Gamrot here by decision. How do you see this one going, Brett?
I think this is a real interesting fight. Odds makers are giving Matthias Gamrot a lot of credit. I think that their head's really where yours is. minus 350 here on the money line for Mateusz Gamrot out of Poland. Dan Hooker is plus 265 fighting near home, a native of New Zealand. But, Dan Hooker has finished guys like Gilbert Burns in the past who, obviously Gilbert Burns is a world jiu-jitsu champion and elite on the ground. So you got to be careful with the long limbs, the knees, the elbows of Dan Hooker coming in. And Mateusz Gamrot really has one game plan, and that's to get him to the ground. Dan Hooker knows that. Mateusz Gamrot knows how he has to win as well. This is striker versus grappler to me. I think that Gamrot is very fast with his hands against other grapplers when we've seen him in the past. He has been able to get away with some of the striking deficiencies that someone who's a lifelong grappler would have. But I don't think he wants to stand and trade with Dan Hooker, especially considering Hooker has a 5.5-inch reach advantage in this one. One statistic that jumped off the page to me, though, for Gamrot was 5.9 takedowns landed per fight. And Mateusz Gamrot really hasn't been involved in that many 5-round fights. So he's doing that, over the course of 3 rounds. This is somebody who's relentlessly going for takedowns. I think Mateusz Gamrot has one of the best gas tanks in the entire lightweight division. I think he's someone who would actually be suitable for 5 rounds if he won this fight and continued making a push. I think that would really suit his style. But I've got Gamrot in this one by decision. I think the grappling is going to be too much. I think he's too smart to get caught at range. He's going to try and push Dan Hooker up against the cage, but Dan Hooker's fighting at home. He's a dangerous guy. He's always there to stand and trade, and you gotta be careful of the length and the elbows and the knees. So I think this one is maybe going to be closer than some people give credit to Dan Hooker. And when you look at this, they have a similar opponent in Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner beat Mateusz Gamrot by split decision, but lost to Dan Hooker by split decision. So I don't know how much fight fans want to put into that or how much stock they put into that, but Jalen Turner is a great fighter, gave Mateusz Gamrot a little bit of problems with his length. We'll see if Dan Hooker can do the same this weekend. But I like the grappling advantage for Gamrot.
Yeah, so it seems like we absolutely agree here that, Mateusz Gamrot's going to, win this. You think it's going to be much closer. I think he's going to, absolutely smother him with the grappling. But, Brett, I really think, obviously, maybe against Dan Hooker. Obviously, Dan Hooker, is a great striker. But I think Mateusz Gamrot is an underrated striker. He does got some KOs under his belt, and he's had some fights where he has outstriking his opponents. He's definitely a predominant grappler, and that's, his wheelhouse. But I do think he can strike, maybe not with Dan Hooker, but I do think he can strike, which makes him, even more dangerous. He doesn't get, probably as many finishes as a lot of people would like. But honestly, Brett, I don't think this one's going to be all that close. I love Mateusz Gamrot. And it's weird, stylistically, I think it depends on who his opponent is. We see him beat guys like Arman Tsarukyan as well. But, I guess it just depends on the opponent for Mateusz Gamrot. But I think right now he's in his prime. I think he's fighting the best he's ever fought. And I think he's trying to go on a serious run to the title. And I think, it's going to start with Dan Hooker. And I think he's going to win this one pretty easily by decision.
Yeah, I like where your head's at. I've got it by decision as well. I think this is going to be a good fight. Maybe, there's a lot of great fights on this card, but maybe fight of the night too. I think that this is going to be a very entertaining matchup as well.
Yeah. It's probably going to be a little bit more entertaining than the next matchup we got, but we do have 2 heavyweights. We got Tai Tuivasa going up against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. This fight, one good thing is it probably won't go to distance. We probably will see a finish. 2 big heavyweights that love to sit there and box, striker versus striker. We probably won't see too much grappling in this one. I really don't like Tai Tuivasa at this moment, Brett. His last few fights have been very, very disappointing. I feel like each fight he gets a little slower. His cardio seems to get worse and worse. And on the flip side, I think Rozenstruik looked phenomenal in his last matchup. He was piecing up and really, really, outboxing Gaziv. And really showed in those later rounds, who the better heavyweight was and what the difference is of being a ranked heavyweight and being a guy who's not ranked. So I'm going to go, Rozenstruik in this one by TKO. He's the better boxer. He's going to have the faster hands. He's going to have the better cardio. And I think by the time we get to the second or third round, when Tuivasa is gassed out, I think Rozenstruik's going to get the TKO. But how do you see this one going, Brett?
This one was the hardest one for me to call of the entire week because, logically I'm right where you are. Tuivasa, when you look at his physical conditioning coming into this one, it has deteriorated with each fight. You're right. He has progressively gotten worse. Whether it's, I don't know whether it's not doing the sprints, whether it's not being in the gym, but his body doesn't seem to look like what it was when he had that win over Derek Lewis and was on his first title push. But at the same time, I feel like just like Israel Adesanya, this is a huge matchup for Tai Tuivasa here. He's fighting at home. He's got power in his hands. He always is a threat to finish the fight. We've seen Rozenstruik get chinned and knocked out on multiple occasions, but he's lost 4 fights in a row here and hasn't won since 2022. So, it is, a crossroad moment in the career of Tai Tuivasa. He's got to pick up a win here if he wants to stay relevant and maybe still have a job in the UFC. I don't think they'll get rid of him. He's a household name and somebody that puts on fun fights, but you got to show up in shape and you got to show up and be competitive. And in his last 4 fights, he hasn't been either of those.
Yeah, and it may not be the end of his UFC career, but if he loses this, he may be fighting a guy who's not even ranked in his next matchup.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So Brett, are you going with Tai Tuivasa by TKO?
I think that he has to here. I think that if he wants to stick around, that he's got to pick up the win here. He's got a couple things on his side. He's not fighting a guy who is a knockout power puncher like Sergey Pavlovich, who he had problems with. He's not fighting an elite grappler. He's had trouble with subs with Volkov and Tybura recently. So he doesn't have to worry about the takedown. This is going to be a stand and trade matchup. Rozenstruik is the quicker fighter, like you were saying, but he has a chin that has been gotten to before. We've seen Ngannou knock him out in like 9 seconds. We've seen him get knocked out by Volkov. Volkov has a victory over both of these guys, but I like Tuivasa in this one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is my underdog play of the week. Tai Tuivasa at home. I think he's going to chin Jairzinho Rozenstruik here, and I think he's going to get him out of there. We've seen Rozenstruik get hit in the past, and I think Tuivasa needs to pick up a win here. But, if you look at the last 4 guys he's fought, Tybura, Volkov, Pavlovich, Gane, and then obviously the big knockout win over Derek Lewis, that's great competition. And when you look at the wins of Jairzinho Rozenstruik here, Gaziv and Chris Daukaus, his last 2 victories, those aren't necessarily great wins. Chris Daukaus isn't even in the UFC anymore. And Gaziv is, someone who's shown up in spurts. He impresses at times, and then obviously he let down in that fight against Rozenstruik. But I think that Tai Tuivasa has fought the better competition, and this is a step down for him in competition. I'm going to take him as a plus 186 betting underdog this weekend, money line.
And Brett, I know you're going with Tai Tuivasa, but you probably have to say if he gets this win, it's going to have to probably be closer to the first round than it's going to have to be in the third round you because of his cardio, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, Absolutely. So you're going first round TKO?
Yeah, I'm going to go first or second round here. I want to see what shape he shows up in. Like, obviously, fight fans, if you see Tai Tuivasa missing the heavyweight limit, don't sit here and be like, well, Brett said that he was going to do that. If he shows up in terrible shape, I can't do anything about that. But if he shows up in good conditioning and looks motivated, I think he has a legitimate chance to win the fight.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. If come weigh-ins, if Tuivasa looks in good shape, I'm definitely going to be a little scared of my pick. So you got Tuivasa by first or second round TKO, and I'm going to go Rozenstruik by second or third round TKO. But there are some other good fights on this fight card, Brett. This is definitely a fight card that's pretty deep. One fight card that I'm pretty interested in is the other fight card, or the other fight we got on the main card. We got Jing Lang going up against Carlos Pratis. 2 KO artists. Jing Lang is a vet coming back. Probably still one of the top 25 welterweights in the world. Carlos Pratis is a talented fighter on the rise, undefeated in the UFC, looking to continue his run and potentially win this fight and try to get a ranked opponent next. I think this is going to be a great fight of 2 great strikers. What are your thoughts about this fight, Brett, or what are some other fights that you're interested in?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this one up. This was the one I'm really, really interested in. I don't see how this one goes the distance here. Li Jingliang. Now, his last fight against Daniel Rodriguez, I thought he won that fight. That was a split decision loss. He had to fight a guy who was, in Daniel Rodriguez, who was the bigger man that night, coming down from, 185 to fight him at 170. I believe it was a catch weight of about 178 pounds in that contest. But Carlos Praetos has knocked out 8 men in a row consecutively. Just got rid of Charles Radke, who we were both high on. Radke has a phenomenal power in his hands and is also a great wrestler. And Carlos Praetos just stopped the takedown, saw the right hand coming, and was able to land a knee that got Radke out of there with a body shot. Carlos Praetos is dangerous. He uses all of his limbs. We talked a little bit about Dan Hooker with the elbows and knees from him. A similar thing with Carlos Praetos, but more athleticism. Carlos Praetos, to me, is just a plus athlete. He's 6'1" here in the welterweight division. He has tremendous reach, 78 inches, almost an 80-inch reach down here at 170 pounds. That is tremendous. So, I think that Li Jingliang may want to take this fight to the ground, but he's not necessarily known as a grappler. He's a guy who we've seen Chimaev carry around the ring, and kind of have that viral moment with him. But Li Jingliang is a tough customer, but he's going to have to be one in this because he's going to take some serious damage from Carlos Praetos, and he's going to have to take that damage and throw stuff back to hurt Praetos. So, I got Carlos Praetos in this one by knockout. I think he gets it done in the 3rd round. I think he wears Li Jingliang down, who is very tough, and finally gets him out of there late.
Yeah, I agree, bro. I got, Carlos Praetos by knockout as well.
Yeah. And then also on the card, one fight that I really didn't – I want to get your opinion on it, the heavyweight fight. I didn't really know who to take in that one this week. There's just not a lot of film out there on Walter Walker. Was stopped in his first fight in the UFC. And then we've got Junior Tafa, who's looked better physically than his brother Justin Tafa. He's the taller brother. It comes in better shape. He's younger, less miles on the clock, looks like a good athlete. But he's facing a guy who's 11-1 in Walter Walker and a very big physical, 6'4", 6'5" guy. Who do you like in that heavyweight matchup?
I think I'm going to go with the unknown guy. I'm going to go with Walker. He's got a great record. And, I know, Junior Tafa, is talented. And we've seen, that he does have potential. But I'm just not really sold on how high his ceiling is and how far he can go in the UFC. And I really think this other guy has got really high potential. And I think he can be a killer in this UFC and in this heavyweight division.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that one. And then there's also a females fight on there that I feel like is worth tuning in for early. Casey O'Neill and Luana Santos, 8-1 for Santos out of Brazil, and 9-2 for Casey O'Neill. Both of those girls, are young, 26 and 24 years of age, so they're going to be around the promotion for quite a while. So I think that's going to be a pretty good fight.
Yeah, 100%. I think I really like Casey O'Neill. I think she's got an exciting game to watch. I like her style a lot. It's going to be interesting to see, who comes out on top because honestly, bro, I think you could pick either one in that matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a really close one to pick.
Obviously, we did have some fights from the weekend ago, led by, the main event, which was our heavyweight matchup. Sergey Spivak submitted, Marcin Tybura. I did, say Spivak was going to win. I did pick him. I said Spivak was going to be stronger and bigger than than he was in the last time these guys matched up. I still thought, Tybura, obviously was the bigger man, and I still thought Tybura would have been the better grappler. But for Spivak to do what he did, even though I did pick him, he still shocked me and, exceeded my expectations. For him to be able to, go to the ground with Tybura, and, be able to pull off that armbar, that was really, really impressive, Brett. Like I said, I picked Spivak, but I did not see it being that way. Spivak would definitely move up the rankings, and he's definitely going to want to fight a guy in that top 7, top 8. There's already, back and forth between him and Jelton Almeida. I wouldn't mind that matchup. Both guys are similar in their weights. I think that would be a good matchup. I think that matchup would really test Almeida's striking. And it will test Spivak's grappling. So I think that would be a perfect matchup for Spivak. But what were your thoughts on this fight, Brett, and who do you think Spivak should fight next?
Yeah, that was a great call by you last weekend. Spivak I knew he was in trouble on the scales on Thursday. He looked in tremendous shape, looked way better than I've ever seen him before physically. It looked like he had abs and was taking this seriously and was in great conditioning. But how about that armbar, man? Being able to pull off an armbar, being the first guy to submit somebody, with an armbar like that since Fabricio Verdum did it in the heavyweight division, is what they said on the broadcast. So Sergey Spivak was showing a piece to the game that we haven't seen before from him. But I like his grappling. I think that he's, very good on the ground, and he can get submissions. He's got big, heavy ground and pound. I just want to see more of his stand-up moving forward. And as far as who he's going to fight next, I think there's a couple guys up there in the rankings that, whether they're booked or not, I think that he has a couple places he could go there.
Yeah, honestly, Brett, like you said, you got some guys who are matched up. There's really only probably, two or three guys that are ranked ahead of them that aren't matched up. The only two guys that really came to mind was either Jailton Almeida, who's just one spot ahead of him, or Sergey Pavlovich. If I was Spivak, I would stay away from Sergey for right now. I think that could be a bad matchup for him for right now. But I really think him and Almeida would be perfect. Honestly, I think it would be the 7th and 8th ranked guy. And maybe the winner of that could, take on, Sergey. But he's definitely got some options. And like you said, Brett, for him to improve so much with striking, to submit a guy in Tibera who is strictly just, or for him to improve so much with his grappling, to submit a guy like Tibera who is all grappling, is very impressive, Brett. And, I'm interested to see, who he matches up next. And if it is Almeida, I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls that off too.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind seeing him fight maybe Curtis Blades. We just saw Curtis Blades get dusted up by Tom Aspinall in a minute. Maybe we see grappler versus grappler. We already saw Blades fight Jailton Almeida. You threw out Jailton Almeida out there. Maybe Curtis Blades as well. I think that would be an interesting matchup. They're on similar timelines too because they both competed recently and could get back in camp at about the same time.
Yeah, that's another good option, Brett. I really didn't think about Blades since it was so close, but you are right. They both fought similar times. And that honestly would be a good matchup. That would be, probably a lot to ask from Spivak. That's, high competition. I'm not sure if he wants to jump up that high, but if he's willing to take up on that matchup, then I wouldn't mind seeing it as well.
Yeah.
There was some other things, Brett, and some other thoughts and reactions I had from this fight card. Chris Gutierrez was able to get back on track with a 29-28 unanimous decision win. He dominated with leg kicks as usual, just like everybody expected coming into that fight. Chape Marcial won by unanimous decision with brutal ground and pound on Damon Jackson. Damon Jackson was tough, but Chape dominated. And honestly, Brett, he looked good and looks like he deserves a ranked opponent next. Danny Barlow, stayed undefeated. His fight was pretty boring, to be honest. But he did stay undefeated. I thought the heavyweight Deonce looked good, keeping Carl Williams on the feet and dominating him with strikes. He's a guy who, has a really good record. And I would like to see him and Mick Parton fight next. Both guys, I think, are undefeated. Heavyweights that are just outside the top 15. And I would like to see those two guys match up, and maybe the winner of that gets a ranked opponent. Lastly, we had Yusuf Zalil having another impressive submission win. After his last couple matchups having back-to-back submission wins over, Billy Cortolano and Aarons, he's on a five-fight win streak, Brett, and he may deserve a ranked opponent as well. But what are some other things that stood out to you, Brett, from this fight night?
Yeah, Chepe Mariscal, we've got a new contender here in Chicago, undefeated since joining the UFC. I really like his game, man. He's a brawler who stands and trades, but also has that grappling game he can go to. So, he's well-rounded. I haven't seen all the submissions yet, but maybe if he rounds out the submission game, he'll be a legitimate threat. But right now he looks really good, man. The strikers, he's able to take him down and beat him up, and then the grapplers, he's able to stand on the feet, and use his boxing. So I think that he's really a matchup nightmare for a lot of guys right now, Chepe Mariscal, and he certainly was one for Damon Jackson. I thought he could have finished that fight in the Chris Gutierrez fight. Chris has got to get a guy out of there who's making his UFC debut. And Chris was, an 8-1 favorite in that fight, and he won 29-28, but he gave up a round to a guy, who nobody gave a chance to. I think that there was a lot of, boring fights on this one. I'm going to be honest with you. There was, about 6 or 7 fights that went to decision last weekend out of the 10 that we had. I thought that Denise, like you were saying, against Carl Williams, he looks mean, man. He looks like a guy who's going in there with bad intentions to get fights done early. But Carl Williams is tough, and, he shoots for desperation takedowns. I thought Carl Williams could have won that fight if he would have shot for a takedown earlier in the contest. But he waited till he was almost knocked out and then shoots for takedowns. And, at that point had already lost the first round, was wobbled in the second round. And then it was too late in the third round when he finally got him to the ground. But it was a good fight. I think both those guys are worth keeping around in the UFC. And I think the Mick Parkin fight that you mentioned with Denise would be definitely something to see.
Yeah, Brett, and, it may not have been super exciting, but it shouldn't be that same fight, fans, this weekend. We got a lot of exciting stuff. Maybe we also got some exciting stuff outside the UFC. We got PFL 8, 2024 playoffs. We got the lightweight semifinals and the light heavyweight semifinals. In the light heavyweight, we got Kasanganay going up against Josh Sylvia. Honestly, Brett, we've been huge fans of Kasanganay. I think he's super, super underrated. And I think he's going to win this fight. I honestly don't see him losing this matchup. And then we also got, Rob Wilkerson going up against Devat Yushala Murdoch. Honestly, this is definitely a tough name to pronounce, but he's definitely a great fighter, though. It definitely doesn't take away from how good he is. I think this is the fight of the night, Brett. 2 killers. I think Wilkerson's one of the best fighters outside the UFC. And Devlet hasn't lost since 2021. But I'm going to go Wilkerson in that one. But how do you see these 2 light heavyweight matchups going, Brett?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Impa Kasanganay versus Josh Silveira, that's a rematch of last year. I think Impa gets it done. If Josh can get the fight to the ground, he's a great grappler. He can submit anybody in the world if he gets top position, and he's a very game competitor. But Impa Kasanganay has tremendous takedown defense. We saw that in his fight with Johnny Eblen. He almost, took Johnny Eblen's undefeated streak from him in that contest as well. I think that is a great matchup and precursor for the one that he's going to be in this week with Josh Silveira. So I've got Impa Kasanganay. I've also got a underdog here. I'm going to go with Dovlet Yagshimuradov. Yagshimuradov is a combat sambo guy who, in my opinion, is going to be a better grappler than Rob. And then on the feet, he is very aggressive. He throws powerful shots. He actually is flexible and creative enough to throw spinning techniques. He goes for spinning back kicks and wheel kicks, not at a rate that you don't normally see for someone at his size and at his weight. It's kind of alarming. He's a stockier guy, but is able to do those creative things. I've got him in this one. I think he's going to be able to take Rob off his feet if he really wants to. But Rob's a great fighter. He's got a great record. He's somebody that can really get it done on the feet and give people a lot of problems. Hard to take down, very long and lanky. But I'm going to go against him, and that's going to be quite the upset. There's some other really great fights on here as well. Former Bellator lightweight champion Brent Primus takes on the all-action fighter Clay Collard. That's going to be a good one. Brent Primus is kind of a grappler, has some very impressive submission wins in his career. Clay Collard, obviously a former professional boxer, and we've seen him go and get in wars with Shane Burgos and Patricky Pitbull. I think that one's going to be the fight of the night. And then, Godzi Rabadanov is a huge favorite against Michael Dufort. I've got Rabadanov in that one. But what do you think about the matchup between Brent Primus and Clay Collard? Do you think that's something fight fans are going to get an entertaining matchup out of?
Yeah, 100%, Brett. Only thing I disagree with you, I think that's probably the second best fight in my opinion. I do think the Wilkerson fight is the fight of the night. I think that fight could go either way. But this is a great fight, Brett. I do think I'm probably going to side with Brett Primus. I think Clay Collard hasn't had, those great performances of late. He was on a dominant run at one point. But I think of late, I think Brett Primus has probably been the better fighter. So I'm going to go with Brett Primus in that one. And I'm going to go with Godzev as well. I think out of the 3 fights, that's probably the one that's the most one-sided. I'm going to go Godzev. So it seems like we're pretty much thinking the same on this one, except for the Wilkerson fight. I'm gonna go Wilkerson, and you're gonna go the other direction.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Yag Shamuradov. That's quite the name that he's got there. But the Bellator veteran, I've seen him compete a couple times, and I really just think that he's tough enough to survive anything that Rob can give him on the feet. And I think the threat of the takedown might get him a decision win. But I think that's the most competitive one we'll see.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. I know I may have messed up his name, but Shamuradov is a very, very talented fighter. Whatever his name and pronunciation may be. Yeah. His fighting skills are unbelievable, and I wouldn't be surprised one bit, Brett, if he went out there and got the win.
Yeah, that's one of the wildest names in all of MMA, quite honestly. I was looking at it on the paper, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
But Brett, we did have some news and some rumors going around. We did have John Jones.
Hold on 1 second there.
Oh, son of a whore.
I'm sorry to scare you, boys.
I just slammed my elbow on the bar chair.
I'm sorry to scare you, boys. I never do this. I never barge into a show unless there is some really important news. And unfortunately, boys, we have some really important news. This is hi everybody. I'm Tom Battle from the MMA Outsiders, the other MMA show here. There's been a very big recent development.
Wait, Tom, can we take a? I said "son of a whore" in there. Can we edit that out?
Edit it out?
Okay.
Tom, now you gotta be checking my phone now.
Breaking news, boys. All right, breaking news, boys. So at the time of recording this, Dana was talking at the post-fight press conference for the first Dana White Contender Series. He has announced Conor McGregor will not fight this year. So your reactions quickly before you get into John Jones and everything.
Yeah. Oh, man, off the top, that's very disappointing. I can't say that it's something we didn't see coming. Me and you were both talking about it and saying we don't know if we'll ever see him fight again. If you go look at the Sturgis video of him in the BKFC fight, chugging beer and stuff, that does not look like someone who's in fight camp or taking it seriously. I really don't know. It's disappointing because everybody wants to see Conor McGregor. Everybody wants to see the big fights. You could potentially get a $2 million pay-per-view fight with Islam Makhachev. You could get the huge Michael Chandler fight. In goodness, you have to feel terrible for Michael Chandler. This is just a shame on his career, and I hope he's been paid. But, it's very disappointing. That's my first reaction to it.
Yeah, honestly, Brett, that was the first thing I thought about was Michael Chandler. The dude's been, putting his career on hold. I know he may not be a true title contender and probably, on the outside of his prime anyways. But, he probably could have fought, 2 to 4 times at this point. And who knows what he could have been. He could be on a 3-fight win streak for all we know. He really put all his eggs in one basket, and it looks like he's really going to lose out on this one, Brett. And, we really were hoping seeing maybe we could possibly get this at the end of the year in December. Maybe for 310 we could have snuck this in. But honestly, Brett, it seems like every time this fight doesn't happen, it seems like it's less and less likely, Brett. And, right now I have no hopes for this fight ever happening. I have no hopes for Conor McGregor ever fighting UFC again. And Brett, do you see Conor McGregor even fighting in 2025?
I don't. I see a public release from the UFC probably somewhere through mid 2025. I think that he probably drags him on here for a good another 6 months, and then the UFC eventually says, "Okay, the writing's on the wall. This guy's not coming back." I would not be surprised if his next contest is not in the BKFC. I'm not even lying to you. He owns a large portion of that company now, and if he went and fought there, he'd get pay-per-view buys, he'd get multiple eyeballs, and all that revenue would go to him, not the UFC. Just as a businessman, which Conor McGregor is a businessman, selling his liquor company for multiple hundreds, millions of dollars. He wants to make the most money, and he's not been given a big part of that pie with these massive pay-per-view events that he's put on with the UFC. Now, he's been given a bigger portion than any other fighter that the UFC's had. But, when you compare that to the Floyd Mayweathers, to the De La Hoyas, to the guys that own their own promotions that they fight in, they're making a significant amount more money than Conor McGregor is off his fights. But, if he went to the BKFC and did something there in a year or two, he'd make straight profit off what he did, and he could go be a champion over there and do his thing. But as far as competing against the top, I don't see it. I don't see it happening again. And especially with it, let's shoot it straight. The guy's an alcoholic. If you can't get on the internet without being drunk, or you can't, get on live streams without drinking pints and doing this sort of stuff, I mean, you got a problem, man. And at some point, you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not the best in the world anymore. And this is holding me back. And he's not doing that. And I don't see anything changing anytime soon.
Yeah, Brett, he's definitely going to have to change some things and make some sacrifices. And when you're living the way he is on, those super billion-dollar yachts and, Lamborghinis, how much motivation and, how much do you really want to go in there? But, if he's willing to do bare knuckle, and have more damage to his health, but like you said, Brett, he'd make more percentage of the pie. Him doing bare knuckle fighting in the main event, that's equivalent to Dana White fighting in a UFC main event and being able to be, the A side of the fight while also being the owner of the company and pocketing everything. So that would definitely be interesting, Brad. And, it wouldn't surprise me, with where McGregor is. It's for a guy like that, you have to pay him a lot of money for him to get out of bed every morning to want to fight.
Yeah. Could you imagine if him and Nate Diaz had their trilogy fight in the BKFC?
Oh, man. Honestly, Brad, I think I don't know if you'd be more excited for it, but is there a possibility him versus Mike Perry in a bare knuckle fight? I think that would be the fight to make.
Yeah, I think both of them, and that's what I'm saying. He's got an ability here to, potentially sell, hundreds of thousands, if not a million pay-per-view buys. It take a huge portion of that money. So, it'll be interesting. Obviously, if he wants to compete at the highest level, there's only one place to do that. But if he wants to go and kind of enter into this, the pasture of being past your prime and that sort of thing and fighting on lesser competition, then he's got a lane to do it. But, very disappointing.
Yeah, 100%. We do got some other news, Brett. Some other disappointing news. John Jones hinted at retirement on social media. I'm not sure where this came from or why he decided to do this, but I saw something on, Twitter and X that he tweeted at a fan that after this year, I'll be retired and never have to work again and be done with everything by the age of 37. So it makes you think, Brett, if is he done, or is after the Stipe fight, is he really just going to call it quits and be like, hey, I won 2 belts. I never basically lost. I'm the greatest of all time. I just beat the greatest heavyweight of all time. So now he's going to say I had the title of the greatest heavyweight of all time, even though he beat Stipe out of his prime. But it's going to be really disappointing, Brett, if we never get to see the Aspinall and John Jones fight. It's depressing enough we never got to see Jones and Francis Ngannou. I think it would be even more depressive if we don't get Aspinall and Jones either. But what were your thoughts and reaction to John Jones saying this, Brett?
I think that John Jones, more than anybody else, knows his worth. At all times, John Jones knows his worth within the company. When you saw him get into a contract negotiation with Francis, who was sitting there ready to take the deal Francis didn't want to take? John Jones. So I don't think that he's someone who's going to be going back into retirement, soon. I think that he's going to fight Tom Aspinall, and he's in a position now to not only be the greatest combat sports athlete, but the greatest athlete that we've ever seen. And that's a reality that only a few people can live in. LeBron James, John Jones. I mean, there's only 1 to 2 to 3 people on the planet that can say they were the best at what they did ever. Now, we're talking about him maybe being the most dominant of all of those people. So I think that John Jones has a huge ego. He has an ego that's going to need fed. And when he beats Stipe Miocic, he's going to have a lot of doubters. He's going to have a lot of people say, you picked on a senior citizen. This guy walked with a cane at MSG, all this stuff. He's going to have the haters that he replies to now come on in and say and invalidate the win and the hard work that he put in. What that's going to do, along with Dana White sitting there in interviews, talking Jones up, saying he's the greatest, all of this, it's going to amplify Aspinall into a position where I believe it's going to be John Jones's last fight against Aspinall. That's going to be, the new guard, the new generation going against John Jones as a 37, 38-year-old man. And if he can get past that one, I think that he fulfills his promise of becoming the greatest fighter that we've ever seen, regardless of whether it's boxing or MMA.
Yeah, Brett, there's definitely a lot to gain. And I think, John Jones, being the competitor that he is, he's done this time and time again. And, he tends to listen to the fans. Fans were like, oh, you have a reach advantage and you take advantage at light heavyweight. You couldn't do that at heavyweight. So what did he do? He moved up to heavyweight and won the championship. So he does love to prove people wrong, Brett. And like you said, when you talk about greatest athletes of all time, usually what it comes down to, it's hard to compare sport by sport, but usually you have to be undoubtedly the greatest at your sport to put yourself in that conversation. Obviously there's a reason why, maybe Michael Jordan and LeBron James, it's a 1A, 1B, but they're in that conversation. You got Tom Brady maybe for football in that conversation, Muhammad Ali for what he did in boxing, Wayne Gretzky, a few other guys out there. But, Brett, there's not really a definitive GOAT in UFC. Everybody seems to have their own pick. Some people like Khabib. Some people even like, Fedor, who didn't fight in the UFC, but he was a great MMA fighter. You also got Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre. There's a lot of them. And there's not that one definitive guy. I think if John Jones was able to go out there and beat Tom Aspinall, he would have to be that guy. There would be no more questions. He beat everybody there was to beat. And even at his old age, he beat the top heavyweight there was on the world. And I think, what Tom Aspinall has done, I think he solidified himself as a tougher opponent than Francis. So I think a win over Aspinall will actually be a bigger win than if he ever fought Francis Ngannou. Because everybody knows Francis Ngannou can only have his KO, and that's it. If he doesn't knock you out, it's not going to go too well for him. Aspinall can grapple, he's explosive, and he can strike. So if Jones can beat a guy who's so all around and explosive and young like that, he's going to go down as undoubtedly the GOAT. And like you said, Brett, put himself in that rarefied era of 5 or 6 names of the greatest athletes of all time.
Yeah, and Tom Aspinall to me is a better win than Francis Ngannou. I think he's more more multidimensional. He can win fights standing, win fights on the ground, and that's really where the problem lies with John Jones. John Jones comes in at heavyweight. He takes Tsarukyan, a guy who fought Ngannou, to a decision, and he gets him out of there in a round. So he was able to take this world-class kickboxer, put him in his game, and get him out of there faster than anybody thought was possible. And when you look at the legacy of John Jones, he's finished so many world champions, finished Mauricio Shogun Rua, finished Lyoto Machida, finished Rampage Jackson, finished Daniel Cormier, finished guys who were maybe the best to never win a title in Alexander Gustafsson, finished Cyril Gane. So, he's beaten guys that just are incredible and Hall of Fame athletes. So, and gotten them out of there. So, John Jones to me is somebody who does not shy away from challenges. He runs towards them. And I don't think that he's going to be running away from Tom Aspinall.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Brett. And I think, this John Jones and Aspinall fight, like you said, it's going to constantly be built up. And it's probably going to end up being fight a year in 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if Dana White's already thinking, putting this on one of those premium cards, like an Abu Dhabi card, or probably, I think, maybe International Fight Week next year. I think that would be the perfect time, International Fight Week. It'd be just the right amount of time after John Jones fights Stipe in November, and I would love to see that fight. But whenever it happens, Brett, I think that's going to be the fight of the year.
Yeah, I think so too.
We also have some talks from another UFC champion. Dricus du Plessis was asking about, if he gets past Israel Adesanya, who's the most deserving. And he's this, sided with, whoever wins between Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker in Abu Dhabi. He thinks that guy is the person who's most deserving. Dana White, reinstated that, Sean Strickland is the #1 contender. And he's the guy who's next up. I've been stating before, Brad, on this podcast for a while that it's definitely Strickland. It has to be Strickland, and Strickland's the most deserving. I mean, I know a lot of guys love Robert Whittaker. He's beloved. He's had a lot of great, wins in his career. But let's be honest, Brett. Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis was a very close fight. Now, I sided with Dricus in that fight, but it was a very close 3-2 round fight. Dricus absolutely destroyed Robert Whittaker when they fought. Yeah. And then we're talking about the same guy in Robert Whittaker who lost to Israel Adesanya, and Strickland beat that same guy. I understand that, both guys beat Paulo Costa, and, Robert Whittaker, if he gets a win over Khamzat, Obviously, that supersedes a win over anybody. But I think Strickland has to get the rematch. And I think whoever wins between Izzy or Dricus, you can sell that fight. If it's Dricus, you can sell the fact that that first matchup was super, super competitive. Even Dana White says Strickland won it in his opinion. And if Adesanya wins, Adesanya can finally get his rematch against Strickland and see if he can overcome those demons, just like he did with Alex Pereira. So I think Strickland, is a top seller. He's going to sell tickets. So whoever that matchup is, I think it's going to be great. And I think, if Khamzat Chimaev wins, I think that might kind of be perfect because Khamzat Chimaev's a guy who likes to take time off and maybe fight once a year, maybe two if he has to. So I think it'd be perfect if Khamzat won that fight. Khamzat could probably take a year off, let Strickland fight the winner of Izzy and Dricus, and then Khamzat just sitting there waiting for whoever's, next up. But I'm glad that Dana White's going to give it to Strickland. I think he's most deserving. But what are your thoughts about that, Brett? And do you think Strickland is most deserving right now?
Well, yeah, I do. But I'm glad there's order and there's a little bit of line, and we kind of know who's next and what's coming. But for me, I don't want to give up on the Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland fight, man. I think that is such a great fight between two former world champions. And we're talking about how, Strickland's looked better against some of the recent competition, but they hold wins over similar guys as well. And the stylistic matchup of the cardio of Sean, those two guys are the best cardioed athletes in the entire middleweight division, both of them technical strikers in their own way. Whittaker able to put in a great game plan of kicks, whether it be low kicks or, as we saw against Alexandre, beautiful high kicks. Sean Strickland is more of a pace and pressure guy, pushes you against the cage, wears you down, and then puts volume on you with the hands. I think that would just be such a fun fight over 5 rounds to see. But the only way that's happening is if Whittaker goes in there and does the same thing to Khamzat Chimaev that he did to Asakura. If Robert Whittaker knocks out Chimaev in the first round, Chimaev goes in there, tries to get the takedown, can't get it, and then gets battered on the feet. I think you have to give Robert Whittaker some type of acknowledgement, some type of reward for what he's gone out there and done for you on short notice, not once, but now twice against Asakura and Khamzat Chimaev. So, Robert Whittaker is a former champion. He's got a legacy. He's a future Hall of Famer, one of the best middleweights we've ever seen. And I think that a fight between him and Sean Strickland, how can we go in 15 years from now, 10 years from now, and have these guys have gone through their career and never fought each other? That's almost criminal that these guys haven't been in there at least one time with each other. So, I really like the matchup. I think that if Izzy wins, this division could quite possibly get held up for a long time. He might go up to challenge Alex at 205 pounds. So, I don't know what these contenders. Sean can sit and wait, but if Izzy wins this title and challenges Alex, he's going to be sitting and waiting for another year. So, maybe that's what needs to happen for this fight to take place. But between him and Whittaker, but I really want to see the matchup between two former world champions.
Yeah, I do too. And, it does seem like we're probably going to have to wait. I think what could happen, Brett, is I think maybe these two guys could fight, later down the line. Once Strickland fights for the title and maybe doesn't get it. Maybe if Whittaker also loses to Chimaev, maybe these two guys coming off losses, maybe we could see the fight then. But honestly, Brett, for Robert Whittaker, he's definitely got to be rooting for Dricus du Plessis in this matchup because the UFC does not want to rebook Izzy and Robert Whittaker again. So if Izzy's a champion, I really don't see how he would even get a title shot. Even if he goes out there and knocks out Chimaev, if Izzy wins, I think what could happen is Izzy could fight Pereira and then come back and then fight Strickland, and Whittaker sitting out for over a year to 2 years. So it's going to be really tough, Brett. I think if Dricus goes out there and wins, then maybe we can start taking Whittaker more seriously. But if Izzy is the champion, it's going to be really hard. And I know if Izzy wins and Chimaev wins, UFC's been wanting to have Izzy versus Chimaev as a booking as well. But they're definitely not going to want to book Izzy and Whittaker. So Whittaker definitely needs Dricus to win. But honestly, bro, I think the UFC is doing the right thing. Let Izzy and Dricus fight. Let Strickland fight the winner of that, probably beginning of 2025. And I do think Chimaev probably gets past Whittaker. And I think that pretty much end all that talk anyways.
Yep, very well could. Middleweight division's in a great spot. We're talking about all these guys at the top, and we still got the 3 guys coming up in Joe Pyfer, Bo Nickel, and Shara Magomedov. So a lot of interesting stuff going on at 185.
Yeah. We also got some interesting stuff to hash out as well at 155.
Yep.
Arman Tsarukyan is calling for an interim title match. Islam Makhachev is going to have surgery, and we probably won't be seeing him until beginning of 2025. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of a layoff. So Arman Tsarukyan wants to get in there and fight someone at the end of the year for an interim belt. And honestly, Brett, this is something that I brought up a couple of weeks ago that I said I wouldn't mind. If we're going to have to wait for Islam Makhachev, why not have an interim belt? I honestly love the idea of interim belts in the UFC. I think it adds more intrigue. And honestly, Brett, I love when we have the interim belt champion against the actual champion, and we get to see two guys with belts fighting each other. I think it makes the fight more compelling. For the casual fans, I think you could sell it more as two champions. It's tough, Brett, because there's not really a deserving guy out there. Justin Gaethje was the top contender. He did lose to a featherweight in Max Holloway, but the fight was at 155, and he is coming off of a loss. So, maybe you could have Arman Tsarukyan and Justin Gaethje, but it is tougher to give Gaethje an interim belt title shot after coming off a loss. So, honestly, Brett, I think the only option, for an opponent for Arman Tsarukyan is someone that we spoke about earlier today, and Mateusz Gamrot. If Mateusz Gamrot goes out there and beats Dan Hooker and is able to, still fight at the end of the year, why not have him fight Arman Tsarukyan? He's been a backup fighter before when Islam fought Volkanovski. So the UFC has already looked at this guy as a potential title bout champion contender. And, he does have a win over Arman Tsarukyan. So you could sell that fight. Stylistically, both guys are great grapplers. So I think that could be a good matchup. And I think whoever wins that fight would be a tough matchup for Islam Makhachev as well.
I think it would be a good, here's the thing, though. Arman Tsarukyan is a little bit under the gun here because he is serving a suspension of his own for hitting a fan at that Newark card. Now, when he gets done, if Makhachev is still recovering from injury, I think they're going to have to get that fight in before Ramadan of next year, or you're going to be waiting a very long time. So if that's maybe the February pay-per-view card, maybe they put it at Super Bowl weekend, Tsarukyan and Makhachev, I'd like that. I think Tsarukyan's going to be out for a little bit of time to where that timetable between him and Makhachev returning isn't going to be too far. I don't know about the interim championship. I don't know if Gamrot necessarily deserves it. If he goes out and takes Dan Hooker out, like maybe you're predicting, if he goes and submits him, finishes him, maybe we'll see. But he holds a win over Tsarukyan, so that's very tough spot to put Tsarukyan in.
Yeah, we got some other rumors as well. We got Kamaru Usman rumored to fight Jack Della Maddalena for UFC 309. If this is true, Brett, it means obviously Shavkat's going to get the title shot against Bilal Muhammad, and this would be the number one contenders match. Honestly, if that's the way the UFC goes, I absolutely agree. Shavkat deserves the title match, and if Shavkat is given the next title match, the next two guys up are Kamaru Usman and Jack Della Maddalena. And whoever wins this is definitely deserving, and I'm glad the UFC went in this direction.
Yeah. I am too. Jack Della Maddalena gets a big name finally. None bigger than former champion Kamaru Usman. So if he can get a victory over him in dominant fashion, he obviously gets the next title shot, gets more fan recognition, and blows up and becomes a household name overnight. I love this matchup.
Yeah. We also got some other rumors for UFC 307. We were wondering about who that main event would be. Well, maybe it might be Alexandre Pantoja going up against a new signed prospect, Kai Asakura. Honestly, Brett, I would hate this. I don't want to see a guy coming in his UFC debut getting a title shot already. He's got to have at least one more, matchup first before he gets a title shot, maybe even two. I hope, what we spoke about the week before with Albazi. I hope that's the rumor that's more accurate. Albazi is the more deserving guy, not, Kai. But, we also have maybe Stephen Wonderboy Thompson against, Michael Venom Page. Two guys with karate styles that we've been begging for a while. I think this could be a very interesting matchup. Both guys are in similar paths in their careers. And what are your thoughts about this, Brett?
Yeah, a little bit too much too soon for Kai Asakura coming over here. Now, he is a great champion. We respect everything he's done over in the Ryzen Fighting Federation. Was a champion over there, fought guys who went on runs here like Manel Cap and, has some very impressive wins of his own, knockout victories. And beat some guys over in Bellator as well, or from Bellator, he went over to fight in Ryzen. Now the Stephen Thompson versus Michael Venom Page, but quickly, I don't believe he deserves an opportunity for the belt. I 100% believe The flyweight division right now is too deep. You have to earn it where we're at right now with how many great fighters that we have. But Stephen Thompson and Michael Venom Page, two kickboxing savants, one technical patient guy, a counter striker in Stephen Thompson versus a little bit more aggressive, flashy showman in Michael Venom Page. That is a great matchup. Fantastic.
Yeah, and last thing I want to say, for Kayas Guerrero, honestly, bro, I would like to see 2 more title fights before he gets. I think Albazi deserves the next one, and whoever wins between Royval and Tatsura deserves the next. So I think he's got a lot of matchups, and then the UFC puts him in there in a fight or two, I'll definitely be upset. And the last topic we got tonight, we do have one more other rumor. We got Jiri Prochazka potentially fighting Jamahal Hill. It's rumored for UFC 310. Honestly, Brett, I would be excited for it. 2 unique strikers. It would be a unique matchup stylistically. This fight was supposed to happen before, but injuries, stopped it from happening. So it'd be great to finally see this fight. Both guys coming off of losses to Alex Pereira. So I would love to see this fight, Brett.
Yep, two former world champions, knockout artists. This one will not go the distance if these guys get matched up. This will be a fan-friendly fight. Jamahal Hill always coming forward, aggressive power in his hands. Jiri Prochazka, just a reckless, creative, ball of violence. So, he's going in there to hurt people and get them out of there. And so is Jamahal Hill. That's going to be a great fight if it's booked. I can't wait for it.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you fight fans. We're going to have a lot of stuff to break down to you next week. We're definitely going to have to react to UFC 305 and PFL. There's also going to probably be a lot of other rumors and breaking news as well. But definitely make sure to be following Puncher's Chance podcast on all social medias at Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all of our shows and other ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to us wherever you can.
Thanks for joining us, fight fans. We'll catch you next week.
See ya.